Good evening, everybody, and you're very welcome to yet another live feed. I said I was going to do one a week, and it's almost getting to be one a day now. So, and Luke said he was doing the same. He's doing live feeds on a regular basis. You know, Glenn Saffer. Glenn Saffer's been involved in patriotic politics for over 10 years, and I want to introduce you tonight to Luke Reid. And again, Luke Reid has got an inside track. Luke Reid does a lot of research on groups that are basically, I suppose, let's just say, causing problems for a lot of people. And but I want Luke to introduce himself and just tell us a bit about who he is and what his interest in these affairs is. And then obviously we're then going to talk about Black Lives Matter, identity politics, and the way the media are race baiting and deliberately trying to stir things up. So over to you, Luke.
Okay, well, I'm Luke Reid. I am a Brummie, born and raised. I left Birmingham in 2014 for work reasons. I've moved around the country a little bit since then, and now I'm living and working up in Edinburgh. Politically speaking, I sort of became more engaged and informed around 2015 time, maybe 2014. I saw stuff on YouTube and then just began watching different sorts of content, different people. Initially, it was people like Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens. And then I just started learning and seeing other stuff and other people. Became interested, started watching content, came across, in the British perspective, Tommy Robinson. Started finding out more about Islam as well, and the menace that thing is in the West and Britain, basically non-Muslim Western or white Western European countries in particular, but also the North American ones and Australasia as well. And yeah, then I started making content the back end of 2017. That was the year we had all the major terror attacks in Britain. And that sort of culminated in me going to one of the demos. I imagine you guys were possibly there, the one in Manchester after the Ariana Grande concert bombing. So I went to that, and then I was sort of speaking to Anne-Marie Waters a little bit at the time. I got the train up to that event. I bumped into Anne-Marie Waters on the train as well. So that's the first time I met her in person. So yeah, back end of 2017, I started making videos, and the first proper video I made was one called Muslim Problems in Britain. It's quite long, extremely detailed, over 100 sources, and it just breaks down all the problems with Islam in this country. FGM, Sharia, just hostility, their overrepresentation in terms of crime on welfare, Muslims this is, the mass rape thing of British kids. And then, yeah, since 2017, I've just been making content online, and 5 of the videos that I've done have been sort of long format documentary types. So the first one was on Muslim problems in Britain. Then I did one about Tell Mama, called Tell Mama Tells Lies, and that's sort of debunking one of their reports on hate crimes.
Yep.
And Muslim victimhood. Then I did one on Hope Not Hate, dissecting a report they did called The State of Hate. And I did one on the hate crime statistics. And then the last one I did was on London knife crime and stabbing murders for the year 2017-18. So
can we get the links from these, Luke? Because obviously, I mean, I'm sure a lot of our viewers would want to see those documentaries. So if you can bounce me the links over, what I'll do, I'll put those links into the video, and then obviously people that are watching it live will be able to get them later on. But people that are watching this after it's gone out, because I'm hoping that this goes out widely. Because what we really want to hear, because I think one of the things, and again, just from talking to you, I think you go into a lot of detail and you do a lot of detailed research. So we want to hear your take on Black Lives Matter, where they came from, what their agenda is, and who who's behind it, in the UK, who's behind it in the United States, and how representative are they of the black community in the United Kingdom. Obviously, we don't have hard and fast stats on that, but just I guess anecdotal evidence is the best thing that we can look for at the minute. So yeah, if you just want to give us a few your summary of what Black Lives Matter is about, the dangers with Black Lives Matter, and how we can counter the dangers that they're really pushing upon our nation for absolutely no reason whatsoever. So if you could just sort of fill in the blanks for us there, Luke.
Yeah, it's there's lots of different elements to it, lots of different facets to it. But the other day, I think probably a week ago, roughly, I did a live stream in response to one of Tommy Robinson's live streams, because Tommy he seemed upset, a bit exacerbated. I believe he's fallen out with some of his black and mixed race friends over Black Lives Matter. And I did a response to that. Anyway, Tommy ended up sharing that. He watches some of my stuff, apparently, occasionally. So that boosted the viewing figures. That was purely on VK. And then another guy that follows me on VK, I didn't know this happened, but he uploaded the same live stream I did responding to Tommy onto YouTube. And that currently has 50,000 views.
Wow.
So that seemed to strike a chord with people. And I think, I'm going to be crass and a bit crude, but I think people just wanted to hear and were relieved and happy to hear a black guy talking common sense, being factual. And I've had really good response to it. I've been going through the comments and whatnot, but I'm going slightly off topic. But in that stream, I go into what Black Lives Matter is. So basically, I'll repeat some of what I said in there. So Black Lives Matter is a hard left, neo-Marxist / communist and anti-white racist activist group. Sort of, it has its historical roots and links really to what used to be the Black Panther political movement in the US during the civil rights era. It is sort of a relative of that. So that sort of hardline, slightly militant and Afrocentrist, anti-white racist element that the Black Panthers had, Black Lives Matter have as well, because they are sort of philosophically, ideologically aligned. And one of the inspiration in terms of people for Black Lives Matter was a lady by the name of Assata Shakur. I believe she is Tupac Shakur's auntie or something. Anyway, she's a fugitive. I think she's still alive. She murdered a cop. So she's a murderer. She's a wanted criminal by the US government, I think, still today. And she was on that hard line, sort of black nationalist, black pride, black supremacist vibe that the Black Panthers had, but also the Nation of Islam had this, and the Nation of Islam still does have this. So Black Lives Matter is somewhat philosophically aligned with all of those groups and those people. And this time now is just a sort of evolution or the latest manifestation of that sort of political thought through the lens of sort of black pride. Sort of word for black pride is sort of Afrocentrism. And basically that's what Black Lives Matter is, sort of politically and philosophically and historically. That's where it comes from.
And again, if I can just again, just for the viewers, I guess to put a bit more context in this, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Luke, because obviously my knowledge of Black history is not fantastic, and that's obviously why we got got you on, because what we're trying to do is fill in the blanks. I had a long chat with Luke earlier on today, and I was like, we're all kind of just looking at each other and going, where did this where did this come from? I thought everything was good, so I guess filling in the blanks, Martin Luther King Jr. would have been opposed to Malcolm X, am I right? In the 60s, Malcolm X would have been, I guess, looking for a sort of violent black supremacist agenda. He was the founder of the Black Panthers, is that right? Was Malcolm X Black Panthers? Am I right in saying that? Was he,
Well,
or was he was involved?
Yeah, I'm not. I just put a disclaimer. I'm not like a history scholar
No,
or anything
no,
like that.
okay.
I've just done a bit of research, but
Bit of
yeah,
research. Yeah,
I'll touch on that
yeah.
for a sec. I referred to all this stuff in that stream that a few people have watched as well. So basically, in sort of the Black civil rights era in the US, there were two schools of thought really, and one was a more peaceful line, so peaceful protest, and also just an acceptance of, it sounds cheesy, but brotherhood of all man. What isn't the most important is characteristics. What's more important is the content of character. Behaviors. Martin Luther King's famous speech and his tagline to a certain extent. So Martin Luther King was of that view. Peaceful protests. I don't hate white people. White people are sort of my brothers. Skin tone, melanin level, all of that stuff is surface level, and character is basically more important than skin tone. So that was one side. On the other side, you had a more militant reaction to sort of the racial injustices, let's say, of that time. At that time, unlike now, there were legitimate grievances from black people in the US context anyway, this is. So Malcolm X was on the opposite side to that. Malcolm X, he basically was a career criminal, in and out of jail, a thug. And then he came into contact with the Nation of Islam. And the Nation of Islam is highly racist, not just anti-white racist, but anti-Jewish racist as well. Nation of Islam is a sort of hardline black nationalist, black supremacist, obviously Islamic supremacist, black American movement. So Malcolm X aligned and joined, in fact, the Nation of Islam. And he was one of the main guys in Nation of Islam for a period. And that was up until a point. And then obviously Malcolm X was a Muslim convert. And he went on a pilgrimage to Mecca. And during this pilgrimage, or not long after this pilgrimage to Mecca, he came more into the Martin Luther King way of thinking, because Louis Farrakhan was lead head guy of Nation of Islam. He's still around now. Right. And interestingly enough, Sadiq Khan defended him not too long ago. Mm-hmm. I think he was trying to get into Britain. So this is an openly racist guy. He's got lots of clear, overt racist statements, rhetoric, and sentiment on record. And Sadiq Khan defended this guy to try and get him allowed into Britain. So when Sadiq Khan says he's against racism and all this stuff, that's just playing to the gallery. But anyway, Louis Farrakhan was a head guy in Nation of Islam, and Malcolm X was. So Malcolm went on his pilgrimage to Mecca, and then he was sort of the opinion that, oh, white people aren't devils, because there's a few famous quotes from the Nation of Islam movement and that whole era, highly racist, anti-white statements. So white people are devils, white people evolved in caves, just lots of derogatory, racist stuff towards whites. And they say this stuff about Jews as well. So Malcolm X sort of turned away from that. He came to the realization that white people weren't devils, white people weren't some genetic defect, as was often claimed by black racists in the Nation of Islam. And they're just people, and if they're fellow Muslims, they are my brothers, irrespective of skin. So he came round to the Martin Luther King way of thinking towards the end. A bit after that, he sort of fell out and left the Nation of Islam. And not long after that, he died or was killed. And the claim is that Nation of Islam basically put a hit out on him, and they're the people that killed him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that you know, I think it's good to put that context there, because I think there's two different streams, and the Martin Luther King Jr. stream, I think everybody, whether they're white or black, can sign up to what Martin Luther King Jr. said, which is that it's the contents of a man's character and not the color of his skin by which he should be judged, and that puts to bed. And I've been talking to Christians about this. I've been talking to atheists about this. Been talking to black people, white people, and personally, my opinion on this is we need to get away from the skin color argument. That needs to be consigned to history, and a lot of people on both sides seem to have a problem with that. And I will argue with ethno-nationalists with white skin, and I'll argue with black and African nationalists with black skin, and say, listen, we have got to bury this, because otherwise this will bury us. If we don't bury the identifying with people on the grounds of a skin pigmentation, which is the only difference, we've got big problems, and I think that's the message that I want to get across. The other thing is, and I want to ask you about this, Luke, and obviously I'm not asking you to speak because it kind of undermines what I've just said about not being interested in the color of people's skin, but there still are community divisions, and there still is a black community and a white community and an Asian community and so on and so forth. I would love to see that done away with, and basically we all just identify as British people, irrespective of skin color. But do you feel that this movement is trying to hijack, let's say, the black community for their own nefarious ends, to create havoc and chaos? Would that be your understanding of what's happening here at the moment, without me putting words into your mouth?
To a certain degree, yes, but I think the larger aspect of it is not actually racial. I think it's ideological, it's political. So basically, the Martin Luther King line of thought, judging people on the content of character, not skin. For some decades now, the left, or the hard left, or neo-Marxists, doesn't really matter how you classify this movement or this group of people, but they've been railing against that. They want racial division. They want distrust between the races. They want to promote that if you are not white, then you are oppressed. I routinely use the term neo-Marxist because that's what these people are. They use the Marxist power dynamics of the oppressor versus the oppressed, and everything they do, everything they view in terms of their worldview and how they see things, how they see politics, how they see the legal justice system, how they see any discrepancy between any racial group, it is viewed through the neo-Marxist or Marxist power dynamic of the oppressor versus the oppressed. So basically, these people have got a hierarchy of victim classes, and white men are at the top as the oppressors, and basically everyone else underneath is the oppressed. And effectively, all the work that they've been doing, sort of infiltrating and taking over the entire establishment, basically. There's lots of mainstream bits of neo-Marxist dogma now. So a quick example is diversity and inclusion. there's not a corporation, sorry, there's not a corporation that doesn't abide by neo-Marxist dogmas like diversity and inclusion. So having quotas for women, having quotas for BAME, which is black and minority ethnic, the nonsensical term.
Can I just jump in there, Luke? I mean, that BAME tag is fairly recent. I mean, I've only become aware of it in the past sort of 2 years, I suppose, maximum, maybe a year, to be honest with you. Where does that come from? I mean, to me, that is deliberately trying to separate white people from every other ethnic group in the country. Yeah. Does that make sense? Is that what that's about? That's what it seems to me. It seems it's deliberately separatist and divisive. And well, one, I guess, how do black people feel about being lumped in with Chinese people and Pakistani people? It's just like, you're all the group over there, and then there's the whites over here. I mean, what do you think about that? It seems absolutely insane to me,
Yeah, I couldn't tell you where exactly the term BAME came from. I couldn't tell you who coined it, but as you said, it is relatively new. It's a new term, new terminology, and it's similar to the phrase "people of color." I detest that phrase, so that's relatively new as well. But all of these phrases, as you rightly pointed out, are divisive, and they fit the neo-Marxist power dynamics of the oppressor versus the oppressed. So BAME all come under category of the oppressed. So it's just a nice little easy catch-all to basically attack white people with.
But at the same time, look, do you not think it's also attacking black people, Asian people, whatever minority ethnic is? I mean, I don't even know what minority ethnic means. I mean, maybe that's Polish people. I'm not sure, but it seems to be patronizing and insulting to people that aren't white as well, because it's saying there's, if this hierarchy were true, then what it's actually doing is saying, well, we've got to help these poor black, Asian, and minority ethnic people because they can't help themselves. And that seems to be hugely insulting, but also very, very detrimental to the psyche of any group of people that are being told that you're being oppressed all the time. It kind of reinforces that mindset within people's psyche. Does that make any sense, what I'm saying there?
Yeah, and that is entirely the point of it. It's deliberate to cultivate a victimhood mentality amongst non-whites. Now, for differing reasons, that victimhood mentality, it is to a certain extent, it is already in some black people. Now, there's no numbers on this. I have no idea how common it is, and it would vary and range from individual to individual. It's not something I have ever had, for example, but my sibling could be raised in very similar circumstances, and my sibling could regard themselves as a victim. I don't think my siblings do, but I'm just as an example, showing how it would vary person to person. So this is not uncommon amongst some black people. So all of the stuff that the left is doing is sort of pandering to that. I would call it an insecurity, really. Yeah. Pandering to that insecurity that some black people or just some non-whites may have in a white majority country. It's sort of expressed sometimes as chip on the shoulder. So that's an expression of it as well. But it's basically a victimhood mentality. So yeah, the left play on this with all of their words, all of their linguistics, all of their policies, and all of their narrative as well. They are determined to convince BAME as just a whole group that they are oppressed by the white man, that white majority Western nations are systemically, institutionally racist, and discriminate against people like me, and people like me are hunted down by the police disproportionately, shot for being black. We are arrested at disproportionate rates, specifically black people, because of white racism, white colonialism, white imperialism. And a lot of this stuff is Afrocentrism. Afrocentrism pushes a lot of this black victim mentality, and a sort of counter to that, a sort of overcompensation, is the sort of faux black pride. And this is expressed in the sort of internet culture meme, "We was Kangs." I don't if people can look into that, but that's all part of Afrocentrism. So, you know, thinking blacks were the greatest in history and the civilization was great, but it's been sort of systematically undersold and lied about by evil white oppressors, colonialists, and imperialists. So, yeah, it is what the left does is push a victim narrative, and I class it as paternal racism. So treating BAME like either children or mentally handicapped, in some way beneath them, basically. So the left is ironically white supremacist in terms of its thinking. It believes that whites are, if not supreme, then above black people. And due to that, black people need a hand in terms of various programs that the far left advocates for, such as affirmative action, which is basically discrimination on the basis of race. Same for women's quotas, same for BAME quotas in jobs. And the BBC and others have been caught advertising jobs for non-whites only.
Yep. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think the thing with all this is, it totally goes against what we were talking about earlier, what Martin Luther King Jr. was pushing for, which was basically a non, a color. And I was talking to a friend today, and this is a genuine conversation. And we were saying when we were growing up, we did not. Honestly, we did not look at skin color. We were our parents, would have hammered it into us not to judge people back, because again, our parents, were sort of young 20s in their 60s, early 30s in the 60s, the 1960s. So they saw what was happening in America, and they looked at what Martin Luther King Jr. was saying, and they were saying, you don't judge someone by their skin color, you judge someone by what they're like, right? And that was the way that I think our generation were brought up. And now this whole pendulum swing. So the left, who are again predominantly, I suppose, white in positions of power, are basically with positive discrimination. It is like you say, it's infantizing basically the communities that they're pretending to help. So which has the opposite effect, because it stops people actually working hard to attain what they need to attain, and basically saying, well, we need to help you, we need to positively discriminate for you, we need to put you into positions of authority, and so on and so forth. Would that be an accurate summary of what you just said there, Luke, do you think?
Yeah, and obviously the phrase positive discrimination is an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense. No organization, no company in this country should be using that. No organization in this country should have any quota of any sort, be that for certain amount of transsexuals, certain amount of homosexuals, a certain amount of non-white people, a certain amount of women. All of this stuff should be done away with. But these are far left neo-Marxist dogmas and principles, but they have been implemented by quote unquote Tories or quote unquote conservatives and people that aren't hard left or far left, but they've somehow managed to win the argument and mainstream all of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think the conservative argument there is. I mean, Peter Hitchens says it. The Conservative Party ceased to exist. About the time that Margaret Thatcher was deposed from power. There's no such thing as the conservative. I call them the Conservative and Communist Party. I mean, they're more right wing than the Politburo was in Russia in the late 80s, and sorry, more left wing, I should say, than the Politburo was in Russia in the late 80s. Somebody's just asked on the screen there. Sarah's just asked, can we ask Luke what his interpretation of white privilege is? Because again, this feeds into the same thing. I mean, I'm feeling really privileged at the minute as I look at my business and my finances go down the toilet because the government's decided to close the country down because of a bad flu virus. But that's another story. But go on ahead, Luke.
Yeah, white privilege. It's obviously a hard left neo-Marxist coined phrase or bit of philosophy, really. White privilege doesn't exist. There's no such thing as white privilege. I am doing better than the majority of white people in this country. Across different metrics, I'm doing better. So white privilege sort of posits that if you are white, you have not predetermined, you have sort of inherent advantages over anyone who isn't white. So you automatically will have better education, you will automatically have access to goods and services and institutions that will favor you over someone like me. It's basically, as I said, an unironic white supremacist position. So all of the leftists, all of the hard left neo-Marxists and communists like Ash Sarkar and Owen Jones that push white privilege being real, they think white people are superior, have these imagined advantages, are better off. But yeah, white privilege is overtly racist, not just towards whites, but it is paternally racist towards non-whites. It's that thing, oppressor versus the oppressed. You have to apply this neo-Marxist framing to every single thing like this because it is like a vein or a spine running through the whole thing. It's always there because that is the core of their worldview. So whites are oppressors and non-whites are the oppressed. So white privilege is just an expression of that sentiment. So it's highly racist to whites and it's highly racist to blacks. And that is the ironic thing about it. And of course, it's highly ironic that these people class themselves as quote unquote anti-racists when they are the most racist.
Exactly. I mean, because they're and what they're doing is, I mean, I think the reality is, and we've seen this a bit on the streets at the weekend. They're sowing so much division with this sort of stuff that they are going to cause what they pretend to be against, which is basically, a confrontation between people of different color purely on the grounds of skin color. And like I say, I know from Tommy's reaction to all this, and not just Tommy, all of us that have been involved in this movement, that the Black Lives Matter thing has come as I suppose we should have seen it coming, but it's totally taken me completely by surprise, and the sort of energy it's got. And I want to look at why it's got that energy. And this feed tonight is called Black Lives Matter, Identity Politics, and Mainstream Media Race Baiting. I'm going to bring up my favorite television presenter now, Mr. Piers Morgan, and let's talk a bit about the way Piers Morgan interviews different people, and one of my other favorite academics, the delightful Kahindi Andrews. So let's just unpack that a bit, Luke. What's your take on the way the media have been race baiting since this tragic murder, an awful murder of George Floyd in the United States? What have the media done, and what's your take on where this is going to lead first of all, and then at the end of the feed, we'll look at how we can actually counter this and how we can actually win, bring community cohesion, back to what it should be, as opposed to what the media are actually whipping up. The media are actually inspiring a race war. That's the crazy thing about this. Just if you could unpack that for us, Luke, just what your take on the mainstream media is and the way they've been race baiting.
Yeah, well, essentially, this current shit show is imported from America. When you break it down, it actually it's quite insane that any protest is happening anywhere outside of Minneapolis.
Yep.
And even there, I don't think it's justified, but it's like mass hysteria is caught on sort of globally. And basically I was going to say it's caught on where there is any hard left neo-Marxist element of note, because, as I said, they love all of this race baiting and selling black victimhood. So any country with any of that element, they will adopt a cause, if you like, and this is a good cause for them to adopt. And obviously the media are hard left and neo-Marxist leaning on aggregate, I'd say. So it's their cause as well. They like this cause. But yeah, even to my surprise and disappointment, even places like Japan, I've read they've had a protest there. I went to Japan in 2017, great country. I'll probably go back. I had no problems there. Japanese people were cool. Obviously, highly homogenous, racially homogenous society. Very healthy majority Japanese. But when I went there, when I was going to my hotel, because there's not many black people around, some guy came up to me smiling, shaking my hand very enthusiastically, very friendly, just because basically I was black. So I didn't really, before this, I was unaware that they had sort of a hard left or neo-Marxist element within Japan, but hopefully that's only small. But getting back to the media aspect of it and the race baiting, yeah, we've imported it from America off the back of their mainstream media race baiting. So for those of you that don't know, more white people are killed by the police in the US than black people are. When you adjust for the black overrepresentation in the criminal and justice system in the US, basically blacks commit quite a bit more crime per capita than whites do, and every other race, in fact, in the US. So when you adjust for black levels of criminality and levels of interaction with the police in the US, they aren't overrepresented at all in police killings. So it's farcical on purely a factual and statistical standpoint. It's also farcical because, as I said, more whites are killed, but this is never publicized. It's never made an international news story. It's never amplified and whipped up and the fans flamed by the mainstream media. And as I said, they like this. This is good news for them. Everything that has happened, it's given them lots of content to write about. It's given them sort of philosophical and ideological and political narratives that they can take, which we saw in the past 2 weeks with each different protest being framed completely differently. One as peaceful protests, the other one as violent, even though the quote unquote peaceful protests saw, I think, 27 police injured, and the quote unquote violent right wing ones on Saturday saw about 5 or 6 police injured.
Yeah, I want to touch just quickly on that, because it is within the remit, because obviously it's about the way the media handle that. I watched multiple live feeds on Saturday to get a handle of what was going on. Obviously, I couldn't be there on the ground, and actually watching the different feeds that are coming in from vloggers, from Rupley, from the various different newspapers, gives you a good idea of what's actually happening because you can see it from literally every angle. And this is my understanding of what happened. And I had people on the ground as well that were sending me feeds straight away. First of all, early in the morning, a veteran phoned me and said he'd just seen 2 vans full of plainclothes policemen who were all white and dressed as football hooligans in the area of Westminster. And this guy is as straight as a die. He does not have to make things up. If you knew his background, you would know why I'm saying that. He's actually an ex-special forces guy. And he said he'd seen that on the ground. Unfortunately, he was carrying some camera kit, so he couldn't take photographs. Now, then when the veterans got to the cenotaph, they were threatened with arrest. They were threatened to be either they moved on or they were going to be removed forcefully, and they were also threatened with arrest under terrorist legislation. Now, then what happened? Word of that got back to the crowd. And think about this. You got veterans standing at the cenotaph. Police officers have just threatened to arrest them when these same police officers did absolutely nothing to stop Black Lives Matter and Antifa desecrating the cenotaph the week before. And then there is a reaction. I'm not condoning the reaction because at the end of the day, the reason I'm not condoning the action because it plays into the narrative that everybody that were there was a far-right thug, which is completely not true. But there is an understandable reaction from the football lads and the Patriots against the police because they think that their veterans are just they're in imminent threat of being arrested and charged with terror offences. And when that reaction happened at that barrier, and I heard that on the live streams, that's why those guys started getting a little bit vocal, agitated with the police at those barriers. So that's, I think, the first point. The second point is that I've spoken to numerous people, people who are involved in let's say, involved in football, football club, football hooligans, right? I've spoken to numerous football hooligans. I just call a spade, right? Or ex-football hooligans, and they said to me that the people that were in Trafalgar Square that charged the Black Lives Matter group and that started being, saying racist things and, making monkey noises and all that sort of stuff. None of those football lads knew who they were. Now, if we, and I'm not saying this is what happened, but this is a possible scenario. My friend has seen vans of men dressed as football hooligans, police officers dressed as football hooligans early in the morning. Mid-afternoon, a crowd of football hooligans, supposed, invade Trafalgar Square. None of the actual football lads have ever seen these guys before. And again, there were people from Chelsea on the ground. There were people from the DFLA on the ground in Trafalgar Square and saw those guys coming in. None of them knew who they were. They came in, caused a whole lot of trouble, and then completely disappeared off the scene, never to be seen again for the rest of the day. Now, maybe it's conspiratorial, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that the authorities deliberately set that up to frame the whole thing as a violent attack by the right wing on Black Lives Matter. And the other interesting thing is that there is absolutely no footage that I have seen of any black people or any of Antifa being assaulted by these supposed football hooligans. Now, that's strange because the thing about football hooligans is they like a fight. So if they're going to run at someone, they're going to end up getting into a physical fight. So there's things about Saturday that absolutely do not add up. And obviously we know what happened after that. The black lads and the black gangs thought they were under attack, and then they got involved in violence towards white individuals and they got, let's be honest, they got involved in racist attacks against white people who were just walking through London. We don't know who those white people are. And the media framed the only bit of black and white violence that we've been shown by the media was this 6'4" bodybuilder carrying an injured white man out of a crowd that were about to beat him to death, so it's it's crazy. And all the footage I was getting on Saturday was of black gangs beating white people up. And some of it was extremely violent. And we were very, very fortunate on Saturday that somebody wasn't beaten to death, that there wasn't one of these white guys beaten to death by the black gangs at the end of the day. And thank goodness it didn't happen, because we would be in an even more difficult situation that we're in now. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that what happened on Saturday was a put-up job and everybody said it was a trap. We all knew it was a trap. It doesn't mean that you didn't go. I was against cancelling it, and a lot of people have given me flack. I told people on Thursday night there was no need to go because the police had given us assurances that they were going to guard the monuments. However, what I did say was, if you want to go and peacefully protest, it is your democratic right to do that, and you should feel free to go and do that anyway. But it was definitely a trap by the authorities. It was definitely a trap by the mainstream media, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility that agent provocateurs went into Trafalgar Square to start trouble and provoke the Black Lives Matter crowd, who, let's be honest, were there peacefully. They weren't doing, and I'm no fan of Black Lives Matter, but they were not being violent from what I could see. So that's a possibility of what happened on Saturday. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, Richard, hold on a minute. Richard, the only time they went violent, Richard, was when that person gave the monkey noises.
Yeah,
it's the only time. I'm watching the police going in there. And as soon as that bloke went on that balcony, he was at the top of the balcony. He gave that thing under his arms. Horrible what he went and done. The police took him away.
But he wasn't arrested.
Never arrested. And that's when the Black Lives Matter started on white people in Trafalgar Square.
Exactly. And the other thing I want to call out as well, and because we've got to be consistent in this, there was people in calling themselves patriots wearing T-shirts saying white lives matter. Now, if I'm going to speak out against Black Lives Matter because I think that's a racist slogan, I'm also going to speak out against somebody playing the race card from the white, if we have to split ourselves into communities, which I don't want to do, but if from the white community wearing a White Lives Matter T-shirt, because to me, the slogan we should be under is, one race, the human race, or all lives matter. And so if somebody's wearing a White Lives Matter, to me, that is equally wrong. And there was something else. Oh, yeah. And then when violence did break out, a veteran put out a tweet on Saturday night, and to be fair to him, he did actually take it down, but by then it was too late. The cat was already out of the bag. He put up a tweet implying that one of the black lads that assaulted a white guy had stabbed him in the throat and cut his throat. Again, that sort of stuff, unless you actually have hard evidence that has happened, you do not put those tweets out. And it was very obvious. I'm not a forensic scientist, but I looked very closely at that photograph, and the implement that was meant to be a knife was somebody's leg. I mean, so this guy's meant to have a knife in his hand. It was a man's leg. Now that guy was actually very seriously assaulted, but nobody, as far as I know, nobody was killed on Saturday, and nobody had their throat slashed. And Mark Collette put that out on his Twitter page, and I called him out on it. I said, that's not true. That didn't happen. And of course, this fits their agenda as well. This fits the white supremacist agenda as well, because they want a race war just as much as the far left and the Socialist Workers Party want a race war. The ethno-nats, that fits their narrative as well, because they're rubbing their hands together with glee, going, look at all these new recruits we've got. Bring it on. We love this. And this is where we're at. So we're looking at all these things. Two-stab police. Yeah, the police said that, but again, we've got no evidence that was true. Just because a police, believe you me, as we've all found out to our cost, just because a policeman says it does not mean it's true by any means. We don't agree on that.
Richard, is when the policeman put out 2 got stabbed, do we know when that got filmed?
No,
we
don't.
Was that filmed in 2018?
Exactly. We don't know. We don't know when it was filmed. And the reality is, fake Chinese whispers. I mean, yes. when we're trying to be factual and we're trying to analyze events, and get to the truth. And it's all about getting to the truth. We cannot put unsubstantiated claims out on social media because, again, there was a meme going around, not a meme going around, there was a Photoshop thing going around of some black guy, and everyone's saying this guy's just cut someone's throat. Now, they had a photograph of this guy. They even named the guy. Now, that guy's life is now in danger because of completely fake news. And I'll call people out that are supposed to be patriots. They call themselves, even the name of their grouping is Patriot, and they're putting out fake news that could get a British citizen killed, right? And it's absolutely disgusting. And that's got to be called out in the same way that the mainstream media's fake news has got to be called out as well. Guys, we've got to be consistent. We cannot mess about with this because people's lives are at stake. And I think we got away we were very fortunate on Saturday. There was one white gentleman that was kicked so badly that it looked like his eye was hanging out of his socket. He looked totally dazed and confused. Now, that really did happen. We've seen the footage of that. So why make things up about people being stabbed? Absolutely ridiculous. The veteran that did it should be ashamed of himself, and Mark Collette should be ashamed of himself as well, because that was a very, very dangerous thing that he did, and totally unacceptable in my mind. So, Luke, what I guess what I'm aware of is people's time here, and a lot of people are spending a lot of time watching live feeds, which we appreciate. What is your analysis of where we're at in terms of race relations in the UK at the moment with what's happened in the last few weeks? What do we do to try and put the genie back in the bottle, and let's get away from this race baiting on all sides and this dreadful ethno-nationalism and this skin color idolatry that people are engaging in at the minute? What do we do, Luke? Where are we at with race relations, and what do we do to fix this?
Good question. They've taken a temporary hit, most definitely. I am not as concerned as you guys are, or Tommy Robinson is. Tommy Robinson seems to, I love Tommy, but I think you're wrong, Tommy. Tommy is under the impression that there's an impending race war. This isn't true. This is not going to happen. Simply enough people aren't sufficiently riled up for even a possibility of that to start. Now, people may well get more riled up if more events and instances like Saturday occur, where there are clashes, where there is sort of incitement, and where there is violence and potential death. If those events increase in frequency and more people get injured, and there is a controversial, highly publicized killing, especially if it's a white guy killing a black guy, highly unlikely, because if you look at the crime, in terms of violence crime between the races, whites are attacked more than they attack, especially between whites and blacks specifically. But say that were to happen and it went viral, the media would be drooling. The racial identitarian collectivists of all sides, whether that's on the right, the Nazi sympathizer side of Mark Collette and the folks over at Patriotic Alternative, they would lap it up. It's doing their recruitment, and also the far left, because both are racial identitarian collectivists. They sort of value, the primary value judgment for these people is race. It's not ability, it's not character, it's not behaviors, it's race. So yeah, all the racial identitarian collectivists are happy with things as they are, but I don't think to the majority of black people, they are particularly bothered, and it's only going to be applicable to certain black people in certain circumstances, and those circumstances happen to arise on Saturday. So the black people that may get violent is the current criminal element of the black demographic anyway, which is mostly urban, large city-based young males. So from the black demographic, that is who is committing the lion's share of crime, such as knife crime, for example. So a lot of these people are these young black men that were involved in the violence. A lot of them are already criminal. A lot of them are probably involved in some sort of crime. A lot of them would carry knives or be dabbling in the drug trade. So if that element becomes involved, and due to clever advertising in terms of calling the thing Black Lives Matters, some of them do appear to be getting involved and sort of politicized by it. If that criminal element becomes involved, that's when the violence will increase. But I don't foresee a quote unquote race war. I foresee only pockets of trouble in pretty much only big cities, like places like London, probably only London, to be honest, possibly Manchester, possibly Birmingham. But I think any violence is going to be based in London.
Yeah, but the problem there is, Luke, is that when you've got Antifa causing up, stirring the rubbish up, who's bringing the black communities together to bring a waste war, we need to get the communities together to go against Antifa is what they want. How can we be doing that? Because people are standing around and believing what Antifa are doing. They're the ones what's causing the war. They're the ones who are calling the race war. And we need to get our communities together.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree with that categorization. It's more complicated than that. So Black Lives Matter, not only is it like a political or left-wing activist movement or group, it's also a sort of sentiment. So a lot of people agree with the sentiment of Black Lives Matter without necessarily having any connection or affiliation to the political organization Black Lives Matter. So involved in Black Lives Matter, you have different elements. You have the Antifa types, which are mostly white middle-class kids. A lot of these people are communists as well. Also, you have the sort of momentum, Labour, stand up to racism types that are on the left, but are a mixture of different races. Then you have sort of white guilt riddled, largely middle class, but also working class white people that are just naive and don't know the facts. And then you get the sort of black element that is Afrocentrist and is under the impression that blacks are systematically and institutionally oppressed. So it's not a case that Antifa is making black people angry. Some black people are already angry. I think it's a tiny proportion, but some are already angry because they have this victim mentality, and the George Floyd incident was enough for them to personally justify their self-righteous indignation in terms of showing up at protests. So yeah, it's quite complicated if you've not analyzed it and if you're not familiar with some of the context and background.
I think one of the issues. It's interesting because even people like what's the guy that used to go to Speaker's Corner, Sarah Garvey, is that what they call him? You know, he's
Sarah Garvey.
Yeah. He seems to be a black supremacist to me, to just from listening to his rhetoric. But he seems a decent enough sort of fella. I mean, I don't agree what he believes in, but it's like any of these guys that the white supremacists, I absolutely despise what they believe in, but I'd sit down and have a cup of tea with them and try and talk about what they believe, But the reality is, I watched a video Sarah did yesterday, or it premiered yesterday, and he was saying he's totally against Black Lives Matter because, it actually brought out a lot of the points that you brought out as well, Luke, but from obviously a completely different perspective. But he was saying they undermine the family. They are predominantly a middle class, you know, the ideology is a sort of middle class white neo-Marxist ideologies, like doing away with the family, doing away with the police force, etc., etc. And he seemed to, again, to be fair to him, he wasn't exactly speaking up for us by any means, but he was certainly speaking out against Black Lives Matter. And so even on that front, not everybody that is a black Afrocentric black nationalist necessarily supports Black Lives Matter. So I think what would be, and again, I'm probably being oversimplistic in this, but if we could kind of expose, like we've done tonight, expose the roots of Black Lives Matter, that they are not what they appear to be. They're using a tagline to push a neo-Marxist agenda upon the black community. To me, that's something that we need to do collectively. And again, I've said this before, and again, I'm not, you know, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, because I've said this personally to other black friends. There need to be a lot more black men that have the courage that you have, Luke, and will stand up and in the same way that myself and Glenn and Tommy and Anne-Marie condemn the ethno-nationalists who claim to be patriots. I think it'd be good to see a lot more black men standing up and condemning Black Lives Matter. I know there are them, but again, they don't get any mainstream media coverage because it doesn't fit the mainstream media narrative. Yeah. Somebody put up earlier that Luke, you should be on with Piers Morgan. So I don't know if anyone's got any contacts. You know, next time Kehendi Andrews is on Piers Morgan, we should get you to be the counter, Luke. You know, but
Luke, we'll go back to the same thing that I was talking to you last night on the phone. Is that, do you think are we going around the right thing, that we're going to bring our communities together? You know, we've got some bloke talking to Tommy Robertson at the moment. You know, he's brilliant, and we feel like, as Richard, as we want to bring your communities to speak to the young generation before we start talking to them, and then we can all come in as black and white. You know, I know you said there's people stabbing each other. What I've seen on Saturday, and I've been hearing, is that the postcode wars in London, they all come together for that day. You know, all the people that are killing each other, just for that day, Saturday, they all come together. So I'm thinking, I would like to get involved with going to the communities, speaking to our communities. We're never going to talk to the likes of Mark Collett and the FNATs, because I don't want to be talking to them, because they're brainwashed. But I'm wondering if we could. Do you think it's a good idea, Luke, or not?
Again, it's I'll have to speak for a bit, because it's there's different facets and elements to break down. So first of all, there's no there's no black monolith, and there is a demographic of black people, but in terms of black community, it doesn't really exist. That is to say, there's no coherent group of black people that are loosely agreed or loosely have the same beliefs, that if you can get to speak to some community leaders, quote unquote, that you can disseminate a message or sentiment throughout that community. So that doesn't exist, first of all. So I think people need to sort of get that out of their heads. You can speak to specific elements of specific black people in specific places. So if people want to do community outreach stuff in specific places that have issues with black urban crime and the prevalence and dominance of sort of thug and hip hop culture, then I'm pretty sure there's already lots of initiatives and community speakers and social workers and just lots of movements that push anti-knife crime stuff, for example, amongst the black groups in specific parts of London, for example. So sort of community outreach stuff, mentoring, all of this stuff already goes on, Glenn. So it's not a case of starting something that wasn't previously there. All of this stuff is there. In terms of maybe your or our side of the aisle starting it, there probably aren't too many people coming from that political aisle doing community outreach work with sort of Black urban young men. Would that be effective or useful? I am skeptical about that, because as far as I have observed, and I did research on this stuff when I made my London knife crime video, as far as I have observed, the Black community outreach stuff, so former gang members, former criminals that have come out and reformed their characters, they are already out speaking to these at-risk young Black males, and I've yet to be convinced by the data that this stuff has any impact. The main impact and effect and thing you need to do specifically with the young Black male criminal element, it starts very early on. It's sort of early prevention stuff. By the time they're teens, if you're doing mentoring stuff, then it's, you know, the horse has bolted, really. So it's a case of addressing the fatherlessness, addressing the negative aspects amongst certain Black areas or certain Black communities. So not valuing education, not valuing intelligence, valuing the sort of hip hop culture of violence and drug dealing and disrespect to women. It's quite fundamental stuff. But I mean, if Tommy wants to talk with a group of Black guys from in and around London in a bid to de-escalate and calm things down, then I don't think it would hurt. But do I think it would be effective? Ultimately, no, I don't.
Yeah,
sorry to be a bit negative.
I know. That's. How can we finish this on a high? I mean, you know, no, I mean, well, but we've got to be realistic. I mean, you know, we are. I think we're in a dangerous situation. I think if we're in a situation where somebody gets killed, it changes the dynamic dramatically. And I always relate this back to Northern Ireland. I've lived in Northern Ireland since I was in the army and served over here, married a girl from over here. So I know where this goes if it goes wrong. And to me, we've got to do everything we can to talk to people about how we can stop this going wrong without compromising our positions. Because at the end of the day, I've said it and I say it time and time again, I think even the idea of Black Lives Matter, even though it sounds very nice and catchy, I think it's a racist statement in the same way that White Lives Matter is. And I'll stand by that. And I'll be called racist for saying that, but I know I'm not racist. So I don't really care what people call me. So, you know, it's a question of, you know, I think having even these sort of dialogues and these sort of videos going out, you know, we could all be doing a lot, you know, we could be having fun, we could be sitting having a beer, but no, we're sitting talking about this because we care about what's happening in our country. I'd love to get you on again some night to talk about Islam, Luke, because again, that's another huge. I mean, but I think we've really unpacked the left. I mean, just tell us quickly about the guy that you saw from Stand Up to Racism standing in the Black Lives Matter protest, because one of the things I want to do very quickly before we close, if we can again draw in how Stand Up to Racism seems, and again, we're very careful because we know that these people will sue you at the drop of a hat if you say something that's at all in any way untrue. So we're not saying this is a fact, but we're saying this is what appears to be happening. But there appears to be a big overlap between Stand Up to Racism, which is a Muslim Council of Britain, Socialist Workers' Party proxy, in my opinion. If we always put that in, we're totally safe. Always say in my opinion or allegedly. Stops you getting sued. Tommy might learn from that someday, but but so allegedly that, you know, that's what Stand Up to Racism is, and we've got quite a lot of evidence that would back up those allegations. What do you think? Is there a connection between Islamists and the left and Black Lives Matter, or am I conflating something there?
I don't know about specifically the Islamist aspect, but in terms of Black Lives Matter and sort of the hard left, the established hard left in this country, so basically the Labour Party at present, Momentum, Stand Up to Racism, because we already know Stand Up to Racism and Momentum are both confirmed as Labour affiliated, attached to Labour. Isn't Diane Abbott the leader of Stand Up to Racism?
Yeah, and her deputy for some time was, I believe, again, I'm doing this from memory, so and I'm over 50, so I can get things wrong. But I have a feeling it was Tala Ahmed. I could be wrong on that. If I'm wrong, I'll stand corrected. Who was the treasurer of the Muslim Council of Britain? So there is definitely overlap with Muslim Council of Britain and Stand Up to Racism in terms of at the leadership level of Stand Up to Racism. So if Stand Up to Racism are involved in Black Lives Matter, then there certainly is a Muslim Council of Britain influence there as well, from Stand Up to Racism. So I don't think we're going too far in conflating that. And of course, in the States, there's a lot of, Jenny Mills is just asking that now about the Muslim Brotherhood in the States. CARE seem to be involved in supporting supporting Black Lives Matter as well. So there's a lot of this stuff all mixing in, and of course, all of these people have one aim, and it's to destroy the United Kingdom. That is the aim of the Muslim Brotherhood. They want to establish a caliphate. They don't care whether they use violent means or political means. That is their stated aim. They want a global caliphate, and of course, the socialists want a global communist state, a global communist government. So yeah, Muslim Council of Britain is certainly connected with the Muslim Brotherhood, allegedly.
Yeah, I'll just if you want to wrap up soon, I'll add my bit about the Stand Up to Racism links with UK Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
So Black Lives Matter in the UK, it is basically an evolution or relative of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter and Stand Up to Racism, they are relatives, if not the same thing. So the same people supporting and attending Stand Up to Racism protests are doing the same for the Black Lives Matter. And in terms of specific individuals, I said earlier that I went to an event in 2018 and I ended up getting lost in the Stand Up to Racism counter demo. I've got video of this. I've linked this video on my VK. So I'm wondering about the space where Stand Up to Racism is holding their counter demo. And I speak to a black gentleman, and I've shared a screenshot of this black gentleman on my VK. And this black gentleman has also recently been interviewed on talk radio by Mike Graham. And this black gentleman has also been pictured next to John Boyega at the Black Lives Matter London March in a Black Lives Matter giant t-shirt. And this gentleman is called Gary McFarlane, and he is the leader or one of the UK leaders of Black Lives Matter. So this guy is either in or is definitely in support of Stand Up to Racism. I talked to him on camera in 2018. The video is still up. As I said, it's linked on my VK page, so you can go and watch the video. He's clearly far left Stand Up to Racism, and now he has moved on to bigger and better things in terms of a more publicized, more high-profile political far-left activist group, anti-white racist group called Black Lives Matter. So people can go and watch all of these videos. They can go and watch my video talking to him. They can go and watch his car crash interview with Mike Graham on talk radio. I think that was literally a few days ago. And in it, he's basically saying their plans for a communist utopia. I think it's something like 25 minutes, that interview. And you can all go and search the image of him standing next to John Boyega in a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. So these are hard left neo-Marxist, anti-white racist, bring down the West, bring down capitalism, activist groups. They are all interlinked in terms of Stand Up to Racism and Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of what we're seeing as a direct lineage going back to these groups that we know have been infiltrated by Islamists and hardest of the hard left, and people were talking about hope not hate there, and hope not hate a quote. I mean, it's unbelievable. Hope not hate are quoted in the mainstream media as, you know, it's like gospel. If hope not hate said it, it might as well be coming out of the Gospel of John, because it's absolutely true and that it cannot be questioned. And we all know that hope not hate are complete political activists. Even the extremist that is now their main voice when it comes to speaking about, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a far right BNP member. I mean, he was even far right of the BNP. He was a nut job Nazi, and he came across to hope not hate, and now he's just as radical about the left, which feeds in. I'll close on this. Feeds into the whole idea that people have talked about of the horseshoe theory. If you go round far enough with the left and the right, they kind of meet in the middle. You know, I mean, Adolf Hitler called himself a socialist. So we've got big problems. We're not underestimating the size of the problems, but again, I think what Luke's really brought out tonight is the problem probably maybe isn't quite as serious as we think it is. But I would kind of disagree with you on that, Luke, because what we're seeing is a lot of people going over to the real far right and them getting traction and on one side, and then obviously with the Black Lives Matter thing going on the other side. It doesn't take a large number of people in a country to create absolute havoc, as we saw in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, people don't realize there was only ever on both sides maybe 300 or 400 people that were actually doing the shooting and the bombing, never any more than that, and they destroyed a country for nearly 50 years. And so the reality is, if Black Lives Matter managed to get hold of these black gangs and turn them into some sort of quasi-terrorist force, and if people on the far right manage to do the same, and then of course we're not even talking about Islamist terrorists as well, you know, or the IRA. We've got some serious problems, and I think the more that we can do to defuse this, and tell people there is another way, and it's literally, and I keep harping on about it, there are basically principles that I believe are fundamentally British, and it's freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, equality, and that means Martin Luther King Jr. type equality, not the sort of equality that the whack job neo-Marxists are looking for. Democracy, you know, one man, one vote, and obviously sovereignty. And if we stick to those four principles, no matter what color you are, no matter what political persuasion you are, to me, you can't really go too far wrong. And I'm encouraged, Luke, that you've got involved in the political debate since 2014, 15. You know, I've come to this late. I really started my activism in 2017 in a big way, and I think we've achieved a lot, even in the last 3 or 4 years, with veterans, DFLA, Tommy doing his stuff, and Anne-Marie Waters and for Britain, and even what we did with UKIP. I think we've woken up a lot of people politically, and we just need to keep doing what we're doing. Any closing thoughts there, Glenn, and then I'll finally finish off, give the last word to Luke.
Yeah, just thank you, Luke, for coming on to Richard. Brilliant. Yeah, I disagree with you that I think it's going to be a lot worse than it's going to come. That's my opinion. Because as you know, in Leicester Square, they were shouting out, kill the EDL, which you know, the EDL has been expanded since 2016. I don't know, they've had about 50 dads going on there. So there's still elements going out there from the left telling the communities that the EDL is still going.
And it's not. The EDL doesn't exist anymore, does it, Glenn? I mean, 50 people, you reckon, are throughout the country. It's gone from like having maybe 10,000, 20,000 people to 50. It's not exactly a bit, yeah.
So that's my thing learned there, Luke, is that there's still elements out there, and I'll see him going around Leicester Square hunting people down in packs. And that wasn't a young generation either. I looked at it, and there's middle-aged people, and you know, and that's my concern. Is that I've still got to go on, Luke, and I'm still going to keep doing it. I've got a T-shirt being made, mate. It's going to be called One Race, Human Race, and I'm going to be wearing it, and I'm going to keep on. Black and white unite, and I want to stop this because I think, Luke, you disagree with me. I think this has put us back. I'm talking about the 70s when there was race wars. In the 70s with the National Front and then the BNP come over. And now, we've educated our children. And our children today are going to be educated again. But I'm worried that these children now are going to go backwards. That's my own opinion. But anyway, Luke, you know better than me on your own people. So thank you very much, Luke, for coming on. So you can do the final summing up, Luke.
Yeah, go for it. Just close off with some thoughts, Luke.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just slightly repeating myself to a certain extent, but I just want to sort of put this at the forefront of people's head when they sort of think of black people in the UK. So it's not it's not a monolith. It's not a cohesive unit that largely agrees with one thing or largely disagrees with another thing. Yes, there are sort of voting patterns in terms of, I think on average, the black demographic, if you like, in the UK does tend to vote left. But in terms of solidified support for Black Lives Matter, I don't think it does exist. There are different types of black people with different types of views and opinions and ideologies and philosophies. Many of which don't agree or align with Black Lives Matter as a political movement, or even Black Lives Matter, the sentiment. A lot of black people would align more with the All Lives Matter sentiment. So my takeaway to people would be, don't get too despondent about the possibility of a race war. Just have the sort of proportions in your mind that what happened in London on Saturday was a minuscule amount of clashes between black and whites. In my opinion, I think it's virtually impossible to happen sort of outside of that demonstration protest context, outside of places like London, Birmingham, and Manchester.
Yeah, so well, I mean, again, let's hope you're right on that, Luke, and I think we need to. I don't think it does any harm anyway to basically try and understand where people are coming from. I don't think that does any harm to and I mean same with anyone with a view that is that we look at as, and we think that's extreme, whether it's Islamists, whether it's white supremacists, whether it's black supremacists. I don't think it does any harm to actually talk to those people and find out. I wouldn't give them a platform. I talk to them on a public platform like this because I don't want to give them that platform. Not because I don't believe in freedom of speech, but there's far more interesting people that I'd want to talk to than talk to them. But I don't think it does any harm to talk to them on a local level and find out where they're coming from and see if they have any genuine grievances that that you can look at and talk about. I don't think there's a problem with that. But the reality is, to me, Britain is an amazing, tolerant, fantastic country that is not a racist country. It's not. I don't believe it's institutionally racist. I don't believe that there's widespread racism. I think every single person alive have their own prejudices. If they're brutally honest, that we're all prejudiced to a certain extent on different issues. But I don't think we've got a huge problem. And what I'm worried about is the fact that this sort of coverage does radicalize people and does drive people to the extremes. And that's what we've been fighting against. Again, we keep saying it. We've been fighting against that, even though we've been called extremists. Tommy's been fighting against this for 10 years. Glenn's been fighting against this for 10 years. I've been fighting against it for about 4 years. And we've got to keep fighting and keep having these debates and keep talking about this stuff. So, Luke, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you on.
Richard, here you go, Richard. Those people asking, Luke, how can they get hold of you on your YouTubes? You have got a big fan base now, Luke. Everyone's saying, where can they speak to you? Where can they look at your YouTubes? So if you can put that over for us, that'd be most appreciated.
Yeah, I'll have to do it a bit after due to the camera thing. I'll have to flip my phone around and all that. But VK is the best place. Just quickly, I've been on and off YouTube for the past, well, since the back end of 2017. I've had 4 channels deleted.
Wow.
Some of it is censorship from YouTube. Sometimes the algorithm has flagged my stuff. Other times it has been the Mark Collette crowd when I've criticized certain ethno-nationalists. Those guys have mass flagged my videos and got me strikes, got my channels taken down. So I'm no longer on YouTube. All of my videos pretty much are on my BitChute channel. That is just, if you go on BitChute, it's Luke Rada. So LUKEYRADA. So most of my videos that were deleted from YouTube are still on BitChute. But yeah, I'd probably say VK as well, because I've uploaded some of my videos onto VK, and that is where I do my live streams as well. So yeah, my VK is also Luke Rada, LUKEYRADA, I'm pretty sure.
But you're not on
So
Facebook. You're not on Facebook.
No, I've sacked off all the big tech platforms because they are highly censorious, and I've literally just been banned from Twitter yesterday. So I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on YouTube anymore. I'm sticking to the alternative.
What did you get?
Tech.
What did you get banned from Twitter for, Luke? What was your crime that got you executed from Twitter? What was the hanging offence?
I came onto the radar of Mr. Mike Stutchbury.
Oh. Who ate all the pies?
Yeah, so he retweeted me responding to one of my tweets, and then his army came in, and then obviously they do what leftists do, which is mass flag you and get you banned. So
isn't it strange that Mark Collette and Mike Stuckbury are using exactly the same techniques? So no doubt this video will be heavily flagged by Islamists, the far right, the far left, Sarah Garvey, and everybody else we've upset tonight, you know. But oh, bro, well, guys, listen, that was fantastic. We'll have a little chat in the green room when we go off air here. So just hang about there, Luke. Obviously, we're going to leave everybody here now. And again, thanks everyone for watching. These debates are very important. You know. And we'll do it until we do get banned or suspended or strikes, because we've got to tell the truth. And obviously the truth hurts a lot of people. And that's why they attack us, and that's why they flag our channels. I'd just love to stand toe-to-toe with some of these people. And I'm not saying any more than that. Right, guys, listen, fantastic. Say again, Glenn. Yeah, yes, yeah, Luke, it was brilliant, and we'll do it all again on some. We'll try and pick some other subjects, and we'll have another crack at this. I think we'll definitely need to talk about Islam at some point. But yeah, I'm just very aware. You know, it's took me a while to get my channel built up again, and I don't want to sort of get binned. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. At the end of the day, I think we're all probably going to end up on VK anyway. And as long as you don't say anything nasty about Mr. Putin, you're absolutely fine on VK.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you all again soon. In fact, we're on again Wednesday. Actually, Wednesday at 7:30. Mr. Simon Bean will be joining me, and we'll be hearing his take on it. We're doing a little Veterans for Truth and Freedom cast on Tuesday night on this channel at 7:30. See you all soon, guys. Thanks now.